I have never scraped peeling paint off my house, not once, and I have lived in the same wooden house here in Norway since I was a boy in short trousers. There is a can on a shelf in my cellar, next to the jars of currants and the box of nails, and where you live, that can costs about $16. That can is the whole reason. My father took the kitchen window off its hinges every few years in September, when the flies had gone and the rain had not yet settled in. He carried the frame out to two sawhorses in the yard and laid it flat in the last of the sun. Then he poured a little oil into a jam jar, dipped a rag, and went over the wood slowly, the way you would rub liniment into a horse's leg. The dry gray timber turned dark and warm under his hand, the color of wet sand. He never sanded anything down to bare wood. He never bought a scraper in his life. I asked him once why he did not just paint it like the summer people did, with the bright white tins they hauled up from town. He said the summer people were putting a raincoat on the window. He was giving it something to drink. I did not understand that for another 20 years, and by then I had watched 3 of those bright white cabins go soft in the corners. The paint on them looked splendid for 6 or 7 summers, then it blistered. Then it flaked off in long curls the size of your hand, and underneath, where nobody had looked, the sill had gone spongy and black. So here is the part that will sound backwards to you, and I want to say it plainly before I prove it. The better you seal a piece of wood against water, the faster that wood rots. Not despite the seal, because of it. Everything you have been sold at the paint counter is built on the opposite idea, and the proof that the opposite idea is wrong is standing in a churchyard on a fjord about 4 hours north of me, and it has been standing there since before Norway had a king anybody remembers.
Wood is not a solid the way a brick is a solid. It is a bundle of straws. It swells when it is damp, shrinks when it is dry, and moves a surprising amount between a July afternoon and a January night. A board on the south wall of my house is measurably wider in August than it is in February. Modern exterior paint is a plastic film. That is not an insult, it is the chemistry. Acrylic and latex paints dry into a continuous skin that sits on top of the wood, and the whole promise of that skin is that water cannot get through it. The trouble is that water does not only come from outside. It comes up from the ground. It comes from the steam of a shower and the pot on the stove, pushing out through the wall from the inside all winter. It gets driven in behind a wind-blown rain at the joints and the nail holes and the top edge of a board where no brush ever reaches. And once it is behind that skin, the skin that was so good at keeping water out is now very good at keeping water in. So the wood swells, and the film has nowhere to go, and it lifts. First a blister the size of a coin, then the blister opens. Then a whole strip of it comes away in the wind, and now you have bare gray wood next to a hard edge of old paint, and the only honest way to fix it is to scrape the entire wall back and start over. That is the job that costs you a weekend of your life, or several $1,000s of somebody else's. Oil does not do that. Oil has small molecules and low surface tension, which is a technical way of saying it soaks in rather than sitting on top. It goes down into the straws and hardens there, inside the wood, filling the space that water would otherwise occupy. There is no film to lift because there is no film. The wood can still let moisture out. The protection is not a wall between the weather and the timber. The protection is in the timber. That changes one thing that matters more than anything else in this whole business, and it is not the price of the can. It is the way the finish fails. A plastic paint fails by peeling, and peeling is a demolition job before it is a painting job. An oil finish fails by fading. It goes pale, it goes thirsty looking, it loses its color on the sunny wall first. And the repair for fading is that you wash it and put another thin coat on top of the old one. No scraper, no sander, no lead dust, no dumpster. You do not undo the last coat to apply the next one, because the last coat is not in the way. It is part of the wood now.
Everything else I'm going to tell you comes out of that one difference. On a green shelf of land above the Sognefjord, at a place called Ørnes, there is a small, dark church built entirely of wood. The pine it was cut from was felled around the year 1130. That is not a legend or a rounded-off tourist figure. The timber has been dated. It was standing before the first stone of Notre Dame was laid. It is a stave church, which means the whole frame is upright posts and interlocking joinery, wooden pegs instead of iron, and a steep roof of wooden shingles. There were once more than 1,000 of them across this country. 28 are left. Fire, reformation, and demolition took the rest. Ørnes is the oldest survivor, and it went on to the UNESCO World Heritage List in 1979. Now, the men who built it were not lucky. They were careful, in two ways that both come back to oil. First, they prepared the tree while it was still alive. They went into the forest, stripped the bark off a standing pine, cut away the branches, and then walked away and left it there on its own roots for several years. The tree does not die at once. It keeps pulling resin up into the trunk, and with no bark and no branches, that resin concentrates in the wood until the timber is loaded with it. Only then did they fell it. They were not harvesting lumber, they were curing it on the stump. Second, they tarred it, and we still tar it. Every 4 or 5 years somebody goes over that church with pine tar, and it soaks into the shingles and the wall planks, and fills the small checks and splits before water can settle in them. Stand near one on a warm day, and you can smell it from 20 feet away, sharp and sweet, like a rope locker. That smell is 900 years of maintenance. Riksantikvaren, our National Heritage Directorate, ran a dedicated stave church preservation program from 2001 to 2015 to put every one of the 28 back into sound condition. Not to rescue them from ruin, to keep a system going that has never been allowed to stop. The buildings did not survive because someone found the perfect coating. They survived because a coating that soaks in can be renewed forever by a man with a bucket and a brush, and one that forms a skin cannot. Pine tar is a churchyard material, and I am not going to pretend you should brush it on your porch. But the principle walked straight out of the churchyard and into ordinary houses in the form of linseed oil paint, which is nothing more than linseed oil and ground earth pigment. No plastic, no solvent to evaporate away. It has been the standard paint on Scandinavian houses since the 1700s, and until about 1950, it was the dominant paint across most of Europe. Then it vanished. By the 1980s, it had all but disappeared from the market, pushed out by cheaper, faster, factory-made coatings. And here is the part I would like you to sit with. In those same years, tradesmen began reporting something that had not been a normal problem before. Paint was failing, and wood was rotting on facades that were only a few decades old. Buildings that should have been in their prime were coming apart behind their own paint. That is what brought linseed oil paint back. Not nostalgia, failure.
Walk into any large hardware store in your town, go to the paint aisle, and look on the bottom shelf near the mineral spirits and the turpentine. There will be a metal can marked boiled linseed oil. A quart runs about $16. A full gallon is around $34. It has been sitting there your entire adult life, and you have walked past it 1,000 times to get to the shelf with the pretty color cards. Start with what it is for. Bare or weathered exterior wood that is not carrying a plastic paint. Windowsills and window frames. The bottom rail and threshold of an exterior door. A garden gate. Fence posts, especially the cut ends, because end grain drinks like a sponge, and end grain is where every fence in the world starts to fail. Unpainted cedar or redwood siding on a shed. Teak or oak garden furniture. Raised bedboards. The wooden handle of every tool you own. That last one is the smallest job and the one I would have you do first because it takes 10 minutes and you will see the result the same day. The handle of an axe, a shovel, a rake, a hammer, a wheelbarrow. Those handles are hickory or ash, and they crack because they dry out, and once they crack, they raise splinters, and then one day they break at the head. Wipe oil on with a rag, let it soak, wipe the excess off. My father's felling axe hangs in my woodshed with a handle that has never been replaced. It is the only tool in this house older than I am. The method is simple enough that it is easy to get wrong by doing too much. The wood has to be dry, and it has to be reasonably clean, so brush it off and give it a light sanding if it is rough. The day has to be above 50 degrees and not raining, and heat and low humidity are what make it dry, so a still warm afternoon is worth more than a bright windy morning. Then a thin coat, thinner than you think. Brush it on or wipe it on, give it 20 minutes to soak in, and then take a rag and wipe off everything the wood did not absorb. That step is the one everybody skips. Any oil left sitting on the surface has nowhere to go and stays tacky for weeks. Wait a full day. Then a second thin coat, and on exposed exterior wood, a third. No primer, no sanding between coats. It will feel dry to the touch in a day, and it will take about a month before the last of the tackiness is gone. The renewal is the whole point. In 5 or 6 years, when the south wall is gone pale, you wash it and put on one thin coat on a Saturday, over the top of what is already there. You will notice what is missing from that sentence. There is no scraping. There is no stripping. There is no bare patch next to an old edge. The maintenance does not get harder as the house gets older, which is the exact opposite of how a painted house behaves. Now set that against the numbers on your side of the ocean. A full professional exterior repaint on an American house runs somewhere between $3,500 and $8,500. Builder-grade exterior paint at $30 to $50 a gallon is generally good for 5 to 7 years, and the usual advice is to repaint every 5 to 10. Do the arithmetic over the 30 years a man might own a house in retirement, and you are looking at 4 or 5 of those jobs. Most of what you are paying for is not paint. It is the labor of removing the last paint. I put a $16 can in the title, and I owe you the fine print on it, because that can is not the same thing as the Scandinavian linseed oil paint I have been describing, and anyone who tells you otherwise is selling something. The hardware store can is an oil finish, not a paint. It has no pigment in it, and pigment is what blocks ultraviolet light, so a bare oiled surface in full sun will gray out and want recoating sooner than a painted one. Most boiled linseed oil sold in American stores also has metallic dryers added to speed it up, which is fine for a fence post and a shovel handle, and is not what a conservator would put on anything precious. It is genuinely excellent on tool handles, gates, sills, furniture, and bare weathered wood. It is not a wall finish for your whole house. Real linseed oil paint is the wall finish, and it is not cheap up front. Expect about $50 a quart. Measured across a surface, it works out near 30 cents a square foot against roughly 9 cents for a standard exterior latex, so you are paying something like 3 times as much on day one. You will not find it in a big box store. It is mail order from a handful of importers. The case for it is entirely a long case. It covers more per can because none of what is in the can evaporates. It never has to be scraped, and it can be recoated indefinitely. If you plan to sell the house in 3 years, that math does not work for you. If you plan to die in it, it does. There are 3 more things that will bite you. Drying is slow, and it punishes a heavy hand. Tacky for weeks, a month to full cure, and worse in humidity. Anyone who wants a job finished by Sunday evening will hate it. Mildew is real on light colors and warm, damp air. In the humid parts of your country, a zinc oxide additive mixed into the paint is not optional, and I would not skip it anywhere the summers are close. And this one is not a preference, it is a fire. Oily rags generate heat as the oil cures, and a wadded-up linseed rag in a trash can has genuinely burned down garages and barns. It does not need a spark. Lay them flat and single on concrete outside until they are stiff, or drop them in a bucket of water and put the water and the rags in a metal can with a lid.
Do this every single time, including the time you are only doing one shovel handle. Then the larger honesty. You cannot brush oil over failing acrylic paint. The oil cannot get through the plastic, and it will sit there and stay sticky and prove me a liar. If your house is wearing a modern paint, oil is not a rescue for this year. It is a decision for the next time the house is bare. And on a house built before 1978, that stripping brings lead paint rules and real money with it. And my weather is not yours. Much of my year is cold and dry, which is easy on any finish. Gulf Coast humidity, a Phoenix summer, a Midwestern freeze and thaw cycle in the same week. These are all harder on wood than what I have outside my window. And if you live under a homeowners association, understand that linseed oil paints come in earth pigments, the ochres and iron reds and greens, and your board may have opinions about that before you have opened the can. Buy 1 quart of boiled linseed oil this week. $16, paint aisle, bottom shelf. While you are there, pick up a natural bristle brush and an empty metal can with a tight lid for the rags. Fill a bucket with water before you open anything. Do the tool handles first, tonight if there is light. Axe, shovel, rake, hoe, hammer, the handles on the wheelbarrow. Wipe the oil on, count out 20 minutes, wipe the excess off. Rags flat on the driveway afterward or in the water. That is the whole job, and it will add years to every one of them. Next warm, dry afternoon above 50 degrees, walk to the window on the south or southwest side of your house, because that is the wall the sun works hardest and the one that fails first. Look at the sill. If it is bare and gray, sand it lightly and give it a thin coat. If it is painted and the paint is sound, leave it alone and note the date. If it is painted and blistering, you have just found the job that has been quietly getting more expensive every year you did not look. Do the cut end of every fence post and every deck rail you can reach. End grain first, always. It takes an hour, and it is the difference between a fence that goes at 15 years and one that goes at 30. Then the longer decision. Before you pay anybody for the next full exterior repaint, spend 20 minutes finding a linseed oil paint importer and pricing a gallon. You do not have to commit the whole house. Do the trim or one wall or the garage door and let it stand for 5 years next to the acrylic so you are deciding with your own eyes instead of my word or a contractor's. And mark a year on the calendar, not a year to scrape, a year to recoat. That is a small change in wording, and it is the entire difference between a house that costs you more every decade and one that costs you less. My father is 50 years dead, and the kitchen window he laid across those sawhorses is still in the wall. The wood in it is older than the country most of you were born in. Nobody in this family ever did anything clever to it. We only ever gave it a drink, and then went in for coffee, and then gave it another drink a few years later, and it turns out that is all a house ever wanted from us.